Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
All right, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. I am Brandon Mileski. Pat Micheletti is always joining me, and Beyond the Pod is brought to you by SodaStick.com. Use the code KFAN for 15% off. Let's immediately get right into it. Minnesota Wild head coach Dean Evason is our guest. Dean, thank you so much for joining us today from Montreal. We really appreciate it. And, before we jumped on the podcast, you had a little bit of flavor of what you're doing in the offseason, but I'm always curious what a head coach does in the offseason. Are you just like shut it down for 3 months and you don't think anything hockey? Are you in meetings with Bill Guerin? Are you watching old tape? What does a head coach do during the offseason?
What's your business, Brandon?
Well, if it was anything serious besides play golf, almost I wouldn't tell you, but I'm absolutely addicted to golf. So I get as much as I possibly can, and obviously we have meetings throughout the summer, with the guys, and it's so easy nowadays as it is now with the Zoom. So we've already dialed in training camp and all of that, and obviously Billy and I are in constant communication about players and what have you. And although the golf courses are wonderful here, I certainly look forward to getting back to Minnesota and getting camp going.
How often? I mean, is it hourly, daily, where it goes through your head, different line combinations that you're thinking about for the upcoming season?
Yeah, it's funny, Pat. It's constant. It really is. I mean, you're thinking, okay, this guy fits here, this guy fits there, and reality is, until you get to camp, till you get them on the ice, till you get them practicing in scrimmages and obviously exhibition games, we won't know who's going to fit. And it's not unlike last year. We had the same type of situation where we didn't know who was going to fit. This year is going to be the same. We're going to have, center ice by committee again. We're going to, see who fits with who. We'll have a lot of trial and error. And, we anticipate that the same thing will happen. Guys will step up. We'll have real good combinations, real good people clicking in different spots. And, but yeah, 100% coaches are always tweaking and playing with line combinations.
I have to give you a lot of credit, because a year ago, I asked you about Eriksson Ek, and I asked you, is there upside that you see in his game on the offensive side? We all knew he could play, that 200-foot game and, shut down center. But boy, oh boy, 20 goals. You had to be really, really happy with the way he played.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's funny because, yes, everybody knows he's such a great competitor and he's such a great defensive guy. But what we saw and still see, it was in practice, was his ability to shoot the puck, his ability to skate, his vision. And it just didn't translate into a game situation. So obviously we had a real good seed and inside scoop that we felt that, it's going to be a matter of time before he comes out of his shell. As you guys probably know, if you spoke to him, he's a very reserved guy. It's taken for him to come out of his shell, not only as a person, integrating in the community and all that kind of stuff, but as a player. It's taken him a bit to realize, I am good. There's so many times that when I was assistant coach, he'd come back to the bench and he'd be like, why is this guy so mad at me? Or why is that guy, and it would be like, well, heck, it's because you butt-ended him in the face-off circle. And but he has no idea that he's doing it because he does it naturally, just competes butt off. And that competitiveness not only allows him to be great defensively, but clearly has allowed him last year, and it's going to continue to allow him to have offense.
Well, what's kind of interesting to me, right, is, people ask me all the time, well, why wasn't Boldy in, you know, in the playoffs? I'm like, well, I'm not the coach. I don't know what their thinking was. But the point being is that, you know, even though you're a number one pick and, number one draft pick and such, everybody is different. Everybody develops different. Guys are ready, you know, when they're ready, right? I mean, just because you're this doesn't mean you're ready to step into a National Hockey League game and, you know, put up big numbers or whatever the case may be.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, we just talked about Eriksson Ek.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we don't know. Like Boldy played how many games?
13 maybe. Yeah.
And an inside scoop. Moose was banged up. Marcus Foligno was banged up. Boldy took warm up in 2 hockey games.
Yeah.
If Moose wasn't able to go, then he was going to go in for him. So yeah, we did have we have a plan for them to play. It may be escalated because of an injury or what have you to play, but we want him to be ready when he does get that opportunity, and he will be. He may be from training camp. Marco Rossi maybe from training camp. We'll see. I mean, that's why there is training camp. That's why there's exhibition games. We can evaluate. We can see if they're ready, and if we feel as an organization that they're not ready yet, then it's not a bad thing to play in the minors, you know, and you know, play against men and get your feet wet in pro hockey, and then you're ready to play when you get here. We signed Freddie Gaudreau, and I had him in Milwaukee, and not unlike Eriksson Ek, his game never translated in the American Hockey League from practice to a game. So we sent him to the East Coast League, and he played there, found his game, came back, and was a real good player in the American Hockey League, put up numbers, competed, blah, blah, blah. Got to the NHL, then he played. He didn't quite make it. Last year, he had a terrific year. We expect him to make that step. Everybody is different. You can't just paint it, just like you said, Pat, that it's, you know, he's a first rounder. Wow, get him in the lineup, he's going to play. Right. That doesn't not necessarily mean he's ready. So we hope he is, certainly. And if he isn't, then he'll play in the minors.
What are you looking for specifically from Boldy and Addison and Rossi in training camp with young guys like that have very little or no NHL experience? What are you looking for in just a 2-week span of training camp and preseason that'll make you believe, hey, they can play on the roster, you know, game 1?
Compete, Brandon. That's it. Just are you comfortable competing? Are you comfortable battling in those situations? We're not looking for them. Okay, Rossi scores 3 goals in the first 3 exhibition games, he's going to play. Nah, we're not looking for that. We're looking for him to compete his butt off. We're looking for him to feel comfortable. We're looking for him to look comfortable playing against men, the bigger, stronger guys, both of them. And if they can do that, they can hold their own. You know, then we'll give them an opportunity, obviously, to play on our hockey club. But that's as far as we're looking. And again, it's no different than a lot of our guys. Like we're not going to keep a guy because he's, you know, maybe scored 5 goals on or what have you. There's a lot of different dimensions that go into it before we make that decision to keep people.
Now, you're kind of in an interesting spot as a head coach. When I'm looking at kind of like the contract issues and the stalemates with Kaprizov and Fiala on one area, you're obviously tight with Bill Guerin and working hand in hand with him, but you also have to be a liaison to the players. So, you know, in a situation like with Kaprizov and Fiala, do you communicate with these guys? Are you talking with them at this point, or do you just completely stay out of all this?
Yeah, I completely stay out of it. Billy and I talk constantly, as I said. You know, he knows my feelings. I know his feelings. And not only him and I, the staff, both our staffs. Yeah, that's not my department. My department's whoever walks that dressing room, put a practice plan together, put a structure together systematically, get each individually to play as hard as they can when they're in our lineup. Nice. And that's what we'll do. You know, Billy's job and Chris and all the guys upstairs, that's their job to get them signed and get them to us. So, you know, I don't talk to players about contracts. I never have, and I never will.
Game 7 against Vegas. You guys had to feel confident going into that game. Brodin gets hurt. They kind of get the momentum a little bit. What's going through your head? When Brodin gets hurt, what's the message? What was, how were the guys on the bench, during that time?
You know what, Pat? Our guys have been absolutely phenomenal, attitude-wise. Not allowing adversity to hurt us in different situations. And the adversity of Broads not being in mentally didn't hurt us. Physically, not having him in our lineup and playing the minutes that he plays hurt us, greatly. Eriksson Ek was really banged up as well. Everybody has injuries. Everybody's banged up. But to lose a player of his stature that eats up the minutes that he does, to exit the zones, the D zone as he does, cleanly, really hurt us in that hockey game. You're right. We did feel very confident in that game. I guess looking back, and why and the reason, the Vegas Golden Knights have been there. They've been there before. They handled, as I said, their adversity, their injuries, their situations, probably a little better than we did because they've been through that situation. So our thought process, our half full situation is now we've been through it. We've had a situation. We're looking forward to getting back there and turning the page in the right direction.
Well, your blue line is going to be drastically different with Suter and Susie and Ian Cole gone, and you add a bunch of players through free agency. From a philosophy standpoint or a structural standpoint, do you change anything when you have new players coming in, that many new players, or is it more of, we went out and sought guys that can play the way we want to play?
I think, Brad, if you look at the group of D that we have, I'm not going to go all through them, but there's 5 or 6 guys that we signed. We have a lot of different dimensions there. There's some bigger guys, some physical guys, some skating guys, some puck moving guys, some defensive guys, a little more offensive guys. So we have a lot of. I'm really excited about our blue line, of the depth of our blue line, to have that many guys that we feel can play the game at our level. Clearly, all of them won't be here with us to start anyway in Minnesota. But it's an open opportunity for guys to step up and compete. So structurally, we feel that we can put all of them in place. The one thing that they all do that you see in our game today, especially on the back end, is they can all skate. Mm-hmm. And whatever other dimension they're going to bring, they can all move. And that is something that we identified that we wanted. I think a lot of teams do, but certainly our organization, and we think we filled it with a lot of guys. Who's going to step up and play in those situations? We'll see. But again, that's what training camp is for.
Yeah, I want to talk about Alex Goligoski a little bit. Now, he's going to be, 36 years old, can still skate like the wind. A lot of people, he's kind of gone under the radar a little bit to a lot of people because, he's in Arizona. People don't see him a lot. You don't see him on national television, but the guy can still play, and he's a great guy also.
That is the one of the best things you just said at the end, Pat, is that he's a good guy. He can play the game. I mean, clearly you don't have to look farther than what he's done in his career to play the game. He can play it on both sides of the puck, both ends of the rink, no question. But I had 3-4 calls from players that have skated with him in Minnesota in the past and said, what a terrific signing. Not because he's a great player, because he's a great person. And that is a key thing for us in the way that we are putting our team together, the way that we're putting our organization together, that they're good people. Clearly, they have to play the game right, but really, really good team players, and he fits the bill. And all of those, we're real excited to have him.
I think one of the key points last year, Dean, you guys were kind of struggling with the center position a little bit, was when you guys moved Ryan Hartman to center. And I'll be honest, I didn't see that coming. I hadn't even considered that. And I thought that top six got a lot better. And, he played pretty well early, at least in the playoff series against Vegas. I know you're kind of maybe leaving a spot open if Marco Rossi can step in, but do you see Ryan Hartman as a center again this year and maybe one of your, in your top six?
Yeah, 100%. Again, such great versatility that we have.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we can clearly he can play both positions. We've seen it now. He's played extremely well at the center ice. But I was very fortunate to have seen him in Rockford in the minors play at the center ice position. So I had a mental thought process there. And then when we started chatting about it as a group, that maybe this would be the right place for him. And then he really excelled. I think if you look back on games 2 and 3, I think all the opportunities that he had, I mean, he was so mad at himself to not score goals, but he did so many other things in all areas of the ice. So, yeah, 100% we see him playing center. But, if Rossi does step up, then he can easily move to the wing and be a top guy in either position. So, it's nice as coaches that we have that opportunity. It's harder to take wingers and put them in the middle as opposed to center icemen and put them on the wall. It's to have that versatility, and so many guys that have played center ice is a real big asset for us.
How about Nico Sturm, another guy who's played a little bit of center throughout his career? Clearly in a bottom six role, I thought he had a great season last year. Many are clamoring, hey, let's move him up and give him a shot on a top six role. When you look at a guy like that, especially at his age, how do you know whether he could be a top six player or if, hey, maybe he's just meant for the middle six or the bottom six?
First of all, I'm so glad I'm not on social media.
You should be.
Yeah.
I do not read anything, honestly, unless somebody brings it to my attention that my wife or whatever says, "Boy, you better read this. You might not be happy with that."
I envy you.
I'll read it. Yeah, but I don't. I honestly don't. I don't. I can't control that stuff. So
no.
And I respect certainly everybody, you guys, fans, everyone that has their opinion. That's your opinion, and that's great. But my job is within the room and try to put the best group on the ice, and that's what we do as a coaching staff without the outside influences coming at us. But as far as Sturmy, I agree, Brandon, that and actually when we put him at center, we thought he made a jump as well. He played wing at the start of the year, but he is such a responsible center iceman, gritty. We expect him to take over at the center ice position with faceoffs. Obviously, we're losing for our penalty kills, so we're expecting him to take a big jump in that role. He's very gritty in the faceoff circle. And yeah, I mean, I've heard the same things, like, let's move this guy up, let's move him. We'll move guys around as we see fit, but we make those decisions obviously on a daily basis. But you're right, we think he had a tremendous year, and we think he's going to continue to do that because of his just his grit and his work ethic.
Well, and what a lot of people don't understand is that a person is where he is slotted for a reason, right? And Sturm may grow into that type of player, where he moves up, but just because you have one good game, two good games, you're having those games because you're playing, you're succeeding against the guys that you're playing against. You're not playing against a number one,
100%.
a number
Right.
two, and there's and sometimes I think people lose sight of that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that like sometimes like we get the ability to see the tape after.
Yeah.
And again, we watch our matchups. We have the analytics. Are we playing them against Connor McDavid every shift? you know, then it might be a different story. Is he playing against their so-called third, fourth line, having success? That's our job to do that. It's our job as a staff to analytically analyze all of that, put it into place, get a game plan, hopefully get the right people on the ice at the right time against the right people, have success. That's our job as a coaching staff. So, but you're right, Pat. A lot of people don't see that. They just see people having success. And boy, he played great tonight, but he, maybe he never played against the first or second line or have you. But again, we think he can. I'm not saying that he can't in our lineup. We think he's got that ability. Again, as we talked, or I mentioned about the defense, they can all move. Sturmy can move. He can really get up and down the ice, and that allowed him to have the opportunities offensively that he had all year last year.
All right, one more about a coaching decision on whether this player could be elevated or not. You look at Joel Eriksson, and I know we talked about him earlier, 20 goals on the season. He was, Pat and I have talked about how great he was with the chemistry with Foligno and Greenway this season. And people say, well, he should move up to play with Kaprizov or Fiala. And Pat and I are like, well, the chemistry is so great and they play a similar style as him that why would you want to break that line up? And you clearly didn't break them up for most of last year. But now moving forward, given the season Eriksson have, how do you balance out, hey, he's got great chemistry with these two with, well, maybe he could help from a center position with some of the higher skilled players?
Well, first of all, it's great to have guys like you guys who understand the game and get the dimensions of what we're doing to translate that to, a lot of fans. A lot of fans obviously have the same thing, but a lot aren't as depth as you guys are diving into it all the time and studying it as you guys are. So we struggle with that all the time. Yes, Greeny, Eck, and Moose were unbelievable. It was so hard. We would go in there after games or the next day and go, okay, time to move Eck up, right? Time or time to move Moose up or time to move Greeny up, right? I mean, and we saw a little bit of it. We did bump them around a little bit. And yeah, that certainly is in our thought process. It's not set in stone. We're not saying, okay, but if you look at our analytics, if you look at the eye test, if you look at the stat sheet, they are great together.
Yeah.
Together. And as a coach putting the lines on the ice, to have that ability to put that line on the ice at any situation, offensively, defensively, whatever situations in the game, it sure is nice. So, but we'll play with it, Brandon. We'll play around with it at camp. We have no issues. Yeah, no question. Eck can play with Kaprizov, with Zuccarello, Fiala. Yeah, we're very confident and again excited as a staff that we have that ability, to have that depth to move people around.
Yeah, well, that line to me was your momentum line. I mean, if you needed, if you were down, if you were, needed a jump, every time, it just seemed that they'd go out there, make a big hit, make a big play, either on the offensive side or the defensive side. And it really, you could just see a change in your game when they did something.
Well, a lot of times you get a line like that and you're just like, okay, they're going to go out and just bang guys and get physical and that's going to change the momentum of the game. That line didn't do – they could do that certainly every single shift. They're physical, but they can score goals.
Right.
Change momentum. They hold pucks down low. They're not just running around chickens with their heads cut off hitting people. They hold pucks down low. They take the momentum back to us. They don't play in their own zone. They exit really cleanly. So yeah, it just changes the flow of the hockey game. So we love them together, but we'll experiment.
Never know.
Dean, really appreciate your time today. Enjoy the rest of your off season, and I'm sure we'll see you in September.
We'll see you on the golf course.
Yeah, hit them straight.
We'll see you there. All right, thanks, Dean. Dean Evason, head coach for the Minnesota Wild. Before I chat with Pat again, let's talk about sodastick.com. You can go to sodastick.com to get your original Minnesota sports inspired goods. If you haven't seen this stuff yet, you absolutely have to check it out. One of my favorite designs is all of the Miracle Herb Brooks related stuff that they have. All of their apparel is screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You will love it. And we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is sodastick.com, original Minnesota sports inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off. Pat, we'll stick with the Minnesota Wild discussion within the past week since I talked to you. I don't really know if this is new news or just continuous news from previously that the agent is just trying to leak to get it out there. But there was the story from Frank Saravelli that Kirill Kaprizov, basically has a tentative agreement for 1 year, 8-figure deal, $10 million deal with his Moscow team in Russia and the KHL. I'm not quite buying it. I think this is just a smokescreen from the agent. What are your thoughts on the report?
Agreed. And what stuck in my head, Brandon, was 1 year deal. Well, if you're going to pay a guy $10 million, right? Maybe more, whatever it was, and only offer him a 1 year deal makes no sense. So to me, I think that is the agent again. I think ultimately, he got a taste of the NHL. He wants to be a top 10 player in the league forever, or even a top 5. And, he's not going to do that in the KHL. So, I really believe that they're going to get a deal done. May take time. Every superstar goes through it. And so I'm, again, not worried at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, the contract alone, you mentioned the 1 year deal. I almost looked at it from Kaprizov's side, right? Because they had to both agreed. They've tentatively agreed on a 1 year deal. So to me, when I see a 1 year deal from Kaprizov, that's him saying, I want to play in the NHL because I don't want to commit to the KHL for more than 1 year. And so if you want to play in the NHL, why don't you just play for the Minnesota Wild right now? And then the other aspect of this, I'm not going to act like I know what the salary cap is in the KHL and which is in Russia, but I've seen from some that their salary cap is $12 or $14 million. Right. So to sign one guy to $10 million, as great as Kaprizov is, that makes absolutely zero sense. So to me, it's just they intentionally put it at that number because they want the Wild to get to that number.
Right.
Is kind of the way I look at it.
Well, here's one subject I want to broach is the Wild and where they're at and what they've done. And, oh, no, the sky is falling. We didn't sign, Nick Foligno. We didn't sign, that number one centerman. I think they were very smart in their moves this offseason, whether, if they targeted a guy and didn't get him, okay, that's too bad. But when I look at this lineup, Brandon, you're losing Bonino. Okay. All right. You lose Ian Cole. You lose Ryan Suter and you lose Zach Parise.
And Carson Soucy.
And Carson Soucy.
Yep.
Can they make up for what they lost? To me, they have done that. Okay. Whether you like it or not, I look at this lineup and, especially, with Boldy and potentially Addison, potentially Rossi coming into the lineup, which is going to take some time. But I think ultimately, to me, they could have a better team.
Well, I'm still a little concerned about the blue line. I do think Goligoski can definitely fill Ryan Suter's shoes, but in terms of or skates, I should say. Yep. But the third pairing. I'm not going to act like I know a ton of these guys and have seen a lot of tape on them.
Right.
But, one of the great traits of that team last year for the Wild is once Ian Cole came over, that pairing of Cole and Soucy was pretty darn good for a third pair. And when you're playing on the road and you've got to play in Colorado against that top line of McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog, and sometimes your third pairing is going to get stuck out there on an icing or defensive zone faceoff where you don't have the matchups. That's a pretty big advantage to have a third pairing as competent as that. And like I said, it's still to be determined because I don't know enough about who's ever going to be in our fifth or sixth defensive spot. But I must say at this point, that concerns me a little bit. And, you mentioned with Dean, the injury to Brodin in that game. Well, I mean, if you have an injury to one of your top four defensemen this year, I get pretty concerned. And let's face it, at some point, that's likely to happen.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's an 80-game season, and you're going to have that. You know, the development of Addison. He played in that playoff game. You've got to have some confidence that he can play in a big game like that. Can translate to a full season. That's what you're hoping, sir. You're going to have question marks. There's no question. We don't know a lot about Goudreau, right? But Boldy and Rossi, they're going to have to learn how to play in the league. The talent is there. So I don't, maybe early on there's going to be some bumps in the road, but ultimately I think they have a pretty good idea of what they have. And I'm confident that the moves that were made were the right moves.
Back to the Kaprizov contract, Pat. I'm really not concerned. Like, I think he'll sign a contract with the Minnesota Wild. What's going to concern me is the term of the deal, right? I don't want to just sign him just for the sake of signing him. Like, if he's got a contract that's 3 years or less, to me that means he's not committing enough here, and that he's going to get the free agency and want to leave. And then at that point, if you sign a 3-year deal, we get to next summer, Pat. He's 2 years out. We need to decide whether we're going to extend this guy long term or going to be forced to trade him if he's going to get the free agency. And when it is 3 years or less, it's harder to trade him because teams aren't going to trade for him. They're not going to give up as much trading for him, knowing that he's going to leave for free agency in a couple of years. So to me, that's my concern. I'm not concerned about signing him.
No, and ultimately, if you can get him to 5 years,
that would be great.
It's going to be 4 or 5. They may have to go down to 4. That gives you a little bit more room. And listen, he likes pressure. He doesn't even feel pressure, but he's going to have to produce if he wants that big deal that is on the horizon. So, ultimately, I think he was pretty happy here. The organization's treated him good. The players on the team loved him. He hasn't experienced the fans yet. And I think that's a big factor because, once the fans are in there and they're cheering him on and they're treating him like a king, if you're treated well, why would you go? And, it's not about getting him a Connor McDavid type, in my opinion. A player's got to feel good where they're at. And so, we'll have to see what happens. There's always going to be, question marks with everything. And you just got to kind of let them play it out.
Pat, Hall of Fame goaltender Tony Esposito passed away in the past week, for the longtime goaltender for the Chicago Blackhawks. I never got to see him play, Pat. What can you tell me about? Obviously, he had a great career.
Yeah, I mean, he was fun growing up as a kid. That's all we watched, the Hawks and that iconic mask that he had. But aside from that, his brother Phil, longtime Boston Bruins star, New York Rangers. They're just wonderful people, and Tony was a wonderful person. I've had the chance to, talk to him, half a dozen times, and every time just a gentleman and a wonderful person, and a great ambassador for the Chicago Blackhawks. And it just he died quickly. I mean, he had pancreatic cancer and passed away in a short amount of time. But just a wonderful person.
What style of goalie was he? Because it seems like all those goaltenders back then were much different than they are now.
With his right hand.
Right hand.
Or left hand, right? Yeah, left hand. Yeah. So, but yeah, and he was really good. He played on Canada Cup teams and, was a highly respected goaltender in the league.
Finally, college hockey at some point, we're probably maybe throughout the next month or so, Pat, we got to start talking to some college hockey coaches. We did talk to Rico Blasi, the University of St. Thomas. They're going Division I. It does sound like St. Thomas will have a new rink announced in the next 6 weeks, probably. At some point in the next 6 weeks, they'll be out with a new rink, and I think it's pretty exciting because we're at a time now, Pat, with the pandemic and COVID, where new buildings aren't being built, so they're going to kind of have that built-in advantage, financially of having a brand new place to recruit.
Well, you having been an alum there, that place has unlimited potential to succeed. And I think it's a gold mine. I think, they're sitting in a great spot where they're located. And I once they get that arena built, and trust me, it'll be a nice arena. I think they're going to have a lot of advantages over a lot of teams. And I think, they're going into this season, with they're just starting out and building, and, they're bringing guys back from last year's team, and some transfers coming in. But I just think they can move up in an awful hurry. I think it'll be a prime spot to go and play college hockey.
All right, Pat, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great, Brandon. Thanks.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. It's been another episode of Beyond the Pod, brought to you by SodaStick.com. Use that code KFAN for 15% off your order. We appreciate Dean Evason, head coach for the Minnesota Wild, for joining us, and we will talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Bye.